Okay, we the Keilim again. Okay, and we are at over here. Let me go. The last Mishna.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You want to do it? No.
Go. You're doing this one.
Okay, I know.
I know you wanted it.
Can't wait. If a woman said, "It is hereby incumbent on me to bring a pair of birds as donated olos," when I gave birth to a boy, if she gave birth to a boy, she must bring two pairs of bird offerings, one pair for a vow and one pair for her obligation. If she gave them to a Kohen, and the Kohen is supposed to offer three birds above the red line and one below it, if he did not do so, rather he offered two of these birds above and two of them below, without inquiring, she must not bring one more bird, which the Kohen should offer above the red line. This is the rule. If the two pairs were both of one species, however, they were of two species, she must now bring two additional birds. If she had specified the species of birds with which to fulfill a vow, she must now bring another three birds as olos. This is the rule. If the original pairs were both of one species, if they were of two species, she must now bring four additional birds as olos. If she had fixed her vow, she must now bring another five birds. This is the rule. If the original two pairs were both of one species, if they were of two species, she must now bring another six birds. If she gave them to a Kohen, but it is not known what species of bird she gave, and the Kohen went and offered them, but it is not known exactly what he did with them, she must now bring another four birds for her vow. Two more birds for the Ola and of her childbirth obligation, and one more katos for her childbirth obligation. But as it says, she must bring two katos. Maybe Yeshua says this is analogous to what people have said regarding a ram. While he is alive, his voice is one. When he is dead, his voice is seven. How is it that his voice is seven after he dies? His two horns can be served as two trumpets, his two thigh bones serve as flutes, his hide for a drum, and his stomach to the sound of boxes of lyres, and his intestines for harp strings. And some say his wool too can serve with the Keilim. Rabbi Shimon ben Ashia says elderly, unlearned men, as they continue to age, their minds get more confused, as it is stated. He removes the speech of the capable and takes away the reasoning of the elderly. But elders of Torah are not like that. Rather, they continue to age their minds because they're even more settled, as it is stated, in the aged is wisdom and the length of days understanding.
Okay.
My wife would agree with the one with Rabbi Shimon about the elderly on.
Okay, first two Mishnayos of Keilim.
Okay. Keilim, Aleph. The Avos of Tuma are a sheretz, a seminal discharge, and one who contracted Tuma from a corpse. A mitzora during the days of his counting, and purification waters that are insufficient to sprinkle. These render people and utensils tamei upon contact, and an earthenware vessel via airspace, but they do not render one tamei being carried. Above them are an avail of purification waters that are sufficient for sprinkling, in that they render a person tamei by carrying, and render clothing tamei by contact, but clothing is spared from tuma when there's only contact. Okay.
Okay. Right. Okay, Mishnah Gimel L'maala mehen. So now moving up in levels of tuma is a boil nida, somebody who had relations with a woman who is a nida. He takes on all of the tuma that she has, which means that he mishkav tachton ke'elyon. So now he has the possibility now of transmitting tuma by mishkav, and mishkav is when you're placing your weight by sitting or standing on top of something that is susceptible to tuma, even though you don't have contact, and it's got to be something that's made to bear weight. So, for example, if he stands on a cup, that doesn't give it mishkav because the cup is not made to bear weight. Right. But if he stands on a carpet, the carpet will become tameh. Okay, even though he didn't touch it.
Just standing on it is enough.
Right. So the kinds of tumah that can transmit mishkav are the nida and the zav. Nida and the zav. I don't think mitzvah. Nida, zav, zava, and is there anyone else who does? I can't remember if anyone else offhand gives mishkav.
But you're talking about standing on an object. If he's walking across a carpet, he would do the same thing.
Absolutely.
Absolutely right. So what? So he has to get rid of this because he can't go. He can't go anywhere. He can't sit anywhere. He can't do anything.
He's got to. Well, or anything that he walks on will just become tame,
Right. But and also anything he touches.
and everything he touches.
Right.
Correct.
Everything. Right.
This is what happens to a woman every month.
Right.
Okay, so she's that's why a woman would have a nida bed, because just leave it tame. Because for half the month she's going to be sitting there. She's going to be tame everything. So give her a bed that's permanently tame and just keep it aside. Okay. Anyway, lamala mehen. So what's higher than a boil nida? Is and why the nida herself? Because whereas the man who has relations with the nida is less than the woman herself, because, for example, his spittle and his urine are not matame in that way. But now the mala mehen zovo shel zav v'ruko v'shichvas zaro. Now, if you have a man who has become a zav, this is a zav who's seen two re'iyos. Okay. Before he remember, the third one is when he starts becoming chayav to bring a korban. But other than that, the zav who's seen two emissions is also tameh in the same degree. So that his discharge and his spittle, his semen and his urine also become tamei, like the dam and nida, the blood of a nida, the shehen metamin b'maga uvamasa. So now these are tamei not only through contact but also by carrying. Okay. The mala mehen, and when we say lamala mehen, it's not always a one-directional thing, because some of them have got leniencies that the level that's so-called below them don't have. Okay, we'll see in a second. Lamala mehen merkav. A merkav is something that you ride on, and there's some different opinions of what's the difference between a merkav and a mishkav. But the one that I find easiest to go with is when you ride something like a saddle where your legs are separated.
Right.
Okay? That's called a merkav. Okay, as opposed to a mishkav where you're sitting with your feet together like a chair. Okay, merkav shehu metame tachas even mesama. So now this has the merkav introduces the phenomenon of having even a stone, a rock that is completely impervious to tuma. But if you have a merkav underneath this stone, and somebody sits on top of that stone, a zav, let's say, a zav sits on top of the stone, the merkav becomes tameh.
The stone?
Yeah, underneath the stone, it becomes...
it like passes through the stone to the
right, and then subsequently, if a tahor person comes and sits on that stone as well, the merkav will push the tumah back up even through the stone onto the person, because it's resting on the. So that's the new chiddush of the merkav, and of course the mishkav, which is a higher level, as we'll see now. Lamala min a merkav is a mishkav. What's there's one chumrah of a mishkav over a merkav, shavim maga'o lemasa'o, that touching it is equivalent to carrying it, as opposed to the merkav. Okay, the mishkav has the additional feature that it transmits the same degree of tumah to one who touches it as one who carries it. Whereas a merkav can only transmit this degree of tumah to someone who carries it, but not someone who merely touches it. So a mishkav has a higher degree of tumah than a merkav, and is therefore listed as the next level. Okay. Lemala min a mishkav, hazav, the zav himself. Shehazav oseh mishkav and mishkav oseh mishkav. So even the merkav and mishkav, by the way, have the property that they get the same level of tumah as the person who transmitted to them. So if the zav himself is an ava tumah, and he sits on a mishkav, the mishkav also becomes an ava tumah. Okay, but why is a zav higher? Because a zav can create a mishkav. So if he sits on the chair, then the chair becomes tameh. But if you stack that chair on top of another chair, the second chair does not become tameh, even though its weight is going onto it. So you need a zav to come and sit on it in order to transmit the tumah onto the mishkav. But the mishkav itself being put on top of another mishkav does not create that tumah. Okay. Daled lemala min hazav. On we go. Zava, the female zava, shehi matama is boala, because she transmits tumah of an equivalent degree to a man who has relations with her, as opposed to the zav. If a zav goes and has relations with a woman, she does become tameh, but she becomes a rishon. Whereas the man who has relations with the zava becomes an av.
Say that one more time, please. One more.
Okay. If a woman, if a man is a zav and he has relations with a woman, he's an avatumah, and he makes her tameh, but only as a rishon. That's it's a lower degree of tumah. Remember our degrees of tumah? Yeah, right. The avi avos tumah only applies to a mace itself. Okay. Then all of the other sources of tumah are called an avatumah, like a dead sheretz, like a zav, like we saw all the avos tumah in the first Mishna of Masechta. Okay. And then things that become tameh from them typically take a degree down. You get a rishon, a sheni. If you've got truma, you can become a shlishi. If you've got kodesh, it can become a revi'i. And if it's meichatas, it can become a chamishi. Okay. So the malam in a zava, who is more tameh than a zava, is a metzora. Shehu matame babia. When we say matame babia, we're not talking about relations. Sometimes bia is used for marital relations, but we're talking about where he walks into a room. Okay, if a metzora walks into the room, everyone else in the room and everything that is susceptible to tumah becomes tameh. Okay, that's the property of a metzora, is that he's matame b'ohel. But again, he is higher than the zava in that respect, but for example, but not in the other respect. So the metzora, if he had relations with a woman, she again would only become a rishon. She doesn't take on the same degree of tumah as he has. Okay. Lamala min metzora, etzam kisora, a piece of bone the size of a barley grain. Shehu matame tumas shiva, because if somebody comes into contact with that, then he gets 7 days of tumah. But again, there is a leniency in this, in that the barley grain sized bone is not matame ba'ohel. It's not enough to cause ohel tumah. Right. But chamor mikulam hameis, the mace that's more, and all the varying degrees of things that are similar to a mace. Shehu matame ba'ohel ma she'en kulam matamim, and the mace causes ohel tumah, which other things do not have. And now there's a difference between mace tumah, just by the way, and the tumah that of a metzora. We said a metzora who walks into a house, everyone and everything inside that house becomes tameh. But there are limitations to that. So, for example, if you put up a partition inside the house for the metzora, and he walks into that partition, even though hang on, how big does the partition have to be? Yeah, 10 handbreadths high. That's not very high. It's like waist height. Mm-hmm. If you have a partition for the metzora waist high, he can walk into there, and everything outside that partition does not become tameh. You can't do that with a mace. Secondly, the mace tumah, even without a roof, can spread. So, for example, if somebody leans over a mace, okay, if someone just outdoors, he leans over the mace, he becomes tameh without touching, because the airspace over the mace happens. If one leans over metzora, he doesn't become tameh. And the reverse is also true, is that if, let's say, people have got a mace on a stretcher and they carry it over a person or a kli, that the airspace again will cause the tumah to be transmitted. The mace's airspace both above and below causes tumah, and if there's an ohel, then the ohel spreads the tumah. Okay, so that is the highest level of tumah, is the mace. Mishna Hay. So Mishna Hay is basically a summary of what we've had before, is showing us that there are 10 degrees of tumah that can emanate from a person. Okay, and the story goes, with a person who starts out with the lowest degree of tumah, and then he goes up to the highest degree. So he starts out Eser Tumas Porshos Mina Adam. Mechusa Kippurim is the lowest level of tumah. He's somebody who is he was a let's say he was a Matzorah or he was a Zav, and he had to bring a korban. So he's done his whole Tara, he's been to the mikveh, he's had Har of Shemesh, and now he still needs to bring a korban. So he's a very, very low degree of tumah over here, which prevents him from eating kodesh. Okay, asur bekodesh, mutar betruma v'maser. But if he's a kohen, he's allowed to eat truma, and he's allowed to eat maser sheni. Okay, so the mechusar kippurim only prevents him eating kodesh. Chazal lios tevul yom. Now what happened is he became tamei and he went to mikveh, but he hasn't yet had har of shemesh. Okay, asur bekodesh. Of course he can't eat kodesh. Ubetruma, and he also may not eat truma even if he's a kohen, because he needs to have har of shemesh before he's allowed to eat his truma. Okay, mutar v'maser. However, even a tvul yom is allowed to eat maser sheni. Chazalios balkeri. Now he had a seminal emission. It's the lowest degree of tumah over here, but he's nonetheless tamei. Asur b'shloshtan, and now he also is not allowed to eat maser sheni. Yeah. Chazalios boil nida. Now he went and had relations with his wife who was a nida, and discovers, oh dear, now he's also effectively a nida. Okay, matami mishkav tachton Keilim. Now he also creates a mishkav just like a nida would. Chazalios zav. Now shira ashtei re'ios. If he sees two emissions of zav. Matame mishkav umoshav. So now he not only causes tumah of mishkav and moshav, but tzarich bias mayim chayim. Now, in order to become purified, he can't just go to mikveh; he has to go to a spring. Okay, upatr min korban, but he doesn't have to bring a korban. Ra'ash shalosh. Once he sees his third zav emission, chayav b'korban. Now he also has the korban issue, and he's even after his tahor, he needs to bring the korban. Otherwise, he's a mechusar kippurim again. Okay, chazar lios mitzorah musgar. So a spot appears on his skin, and the kohen says, "We're going to quarantine this one." So once he's a mitzorah, once he has been quarantined, he has to leave the city. Okay, matame b'bia. If he walks into a building, he causes tumah. Okay, on the ohel upatur min april, but he doesn't have to tear his clothes or letting his hair grow wild. And let's say he becomes tahor, he doesn't need to shave himself or bring any bird offerings. But if the kohen said, "Yep, this is definitely tzaras," then he's going to have to also do all these things: let his hair grow, tear his clothes, shave, and bring birds at the end. Okay. Now he lost a limb. He lost, but it doesn't have it. It was insufficient flesh to heal, had it been reattached. Okay, so now that Eva Minachai is matame only by touching and by carrying. But there's no ohel tumah from this Eva that was separated from him because it didn't have enough flesh to heal. But however, if it's a full limb that has enough flesh, that if you got a good neurosurgeon, he could reattach it. Okay, matame b'maga uva masa uva ohel, then it also has ohel tumah, just like a piece of from a dead body.
Right.
Okay, shear basa karoi, and tangentially, what is the shear of enough flesh kedei lahalos arucha that it would be able to heal if it was reattached to him. Rabbi Yehuda Omer im yesh b'makom echad kedei lakifo b'chut erev, and he says he has a measurement for it. Says Rabbi Yehuda, if there's enough flesh to surround it with the width of a weft thread. Now that's a very thin amount. So the bar is very low according to Rabbi Yehuda for healing. Yesh bo lahalos arucha, and that would be sufficient to effect healing, and it would be considered a that would be considered a full aver. Okay, that's that. And Midos.
Okay, we have Dal Hay. The winding ramp ascended from the northeast corner to the northwest corner, on which they will go up on the roofs of the cells. He would ascend the winding ramp with his face to the west. He walked along the entire northern face of the Hekel building until it reached the west. When he reached the west, he turned his face to the south. He walked along the western face of the building until it reached the south. When he reached the south, he turned his face to the east. He walked along the south until it reached the entrance of the upper story of the Hekel. The entrance of the upper story opened to the south. At the entrance to the upper story, there were two beams of cedar on which they would ascend to the roof of the upper story. End of the beams divided the upper story between the area above the holy and the area above the Holy of Holies. Hatches were opened in the upper story of the chamber of the Holy of Holies, to which the craftsmen would be lowered in crates so that their eyes would not feast on the beauty of the Holy of Holies. Above, the Hekel measured 100 amos by 100 amos with a height of 100 amos, and the otim was 6 amos. The height of the Hekel was 40 amos, 1 amos for each decoration, 2 amos for the bracing, 1 amos for the ceiling, and 1 amos for the pavement, and the height of the upper story was 40 amos. 1 amos was the decoration, 2 amos for the bracing, 1 amos for the ceiling, 1 amos for the pavement, 3 amos for the fence, and 1 amos for the cow chaser. Rabbi Yehuda says the crow chaser was not included in the measure of 100 amos, rather than 4 amos was at the height of the fence. From the east to the west, it measured 100 amos. The wall of the antechamber was 5 amos, and the antechamber was 11 amos. The wall of the Hekel was 6, the area interior was 40, and the amma trackskin 20 amos. For the chamber of the Holy of Holies, the western wall of the Hekel was 6 amos, the cell was 6 amos, and the wall of the cell was 5. From the north to the south, it measured 70 amos, and the northern wall of the winding ramp was 5 amos. And the winding ramp was at 3 amos. The northern wall of the cell was 5 amos, and the cell was 6 amos. The northern wall of the Hekel was 6 amos, and the interior was 20 amos. The southern wall of the Hekel was 6 amos, and the southern wall was 6 amos. The southern wall of the cell was 5 times the place of the lowering of the water, and the lowering of water, the water was 3 amos, and the outer wall, the place of the lowering the water was 5 amos. The antechamber extended beyond the Hekel 15 amos to the north, 15 amos to the south, and this was called the chamber of the knives, for there they would store the knives. The Hekel was carried narrow in the back and wide to its front, and this was the way, and in this way it was similar to a lion, as it is stated. Or Ariel was sitting where David encamped, just as a lion narrow in the back and wide in the front, so too the Hekel was narrow in the back and it's wide in the front.
Okay.
One more?
No.
Right? No?
Mila.
Okay. Okay. Mila. Vav. The Shtei Halekim were subject to Mila from when they are consecrated. Once they are crushed in the oven, they become prepared to be qualified through contact with the Tevel Yom and through contact with the Mekusa Kippurim. And they become fit to slaughter. The Shlomim offering on account of them. Once the blood of the lambs is sprinkled upon the altar, one is liable on account of the Shtei Halechem, for Pigul, Nosor, and Tame, and they are no longer subject to Me'ilah. The lechem upon them is subject to Me'ilah from when it is consecrated. Once it crushed in the oven, it becomes prepared to be disqualified through contact with the Tevel Yom, through contact with the Mekusa Kippurim, and it becomes fit to be arranged upon the Shulchan. Once the spoons of Levana are offered upon the altar, one is liable on account of the lechem upon him. For Pigul, Nosor, or Tame, and the lechem upon him is no longer subject to Me'ilah. The mincha offerings are subject to Me'ilah when they are consecrated. Once they are consecrated in a sacred vessel, service vessel, they become prepared to be disqualified through contact with the Tevel Yom, through contact with the Mekusa Kippurim, and through remaining past their time. Once the kumitz is offered upon the altar, one is liable on account of the micha for Pigul, Nosor, and Tame, and the remnants are not subject to Me'ilah, but the kumitz is subject to Me'ilah until it goes to the place of ashes.
Okay.
And we are on to Keilim. Keilim, Chet. If one slaughters a sacrifice to the mountains, or sacrifice to the hills, or sacrifice to seas, sacrifice to rivers, sacrifice to deserts, the slaughtering is invalid. If two hold a knife and slaughter, one slaughters as a sacrifice for one of these things, and one slaughters for a legitimate purpose, the slaughtering is invalid. One may slaughter neither into seas, nor into rivers, nor vessels, nor one of them, but one may slaughter into a pool of water, or on a top boat, on top of vessels. We may not slaughter into a pit under any circumstances, but one may make a pit in his house in order that the blood should flow into it, but he may not do so in the streets, so that it does not lend support to the practice of the sectarians. If one slaughters an animal for the degree designation for an all offering, shlomin offering, or guilt offering, in case of doubt, a Pesach offering, or a Thanksgiving offering, his slaughtering is invalid, but Shimon declares it valid. If two hold a knife and slaughter, one for these designations and one for the legitimate purpose, the slaughtering is invalid. If one slaughters an animal for desecration of a sin offering, definite guilt offering, a firstborn, an animal died or a substitution, his slaughtering is valid. This is the general rule. Whatever can be brought as a vow or denoted of the offering, if one slaughters for a designation, it is prohibited from whatever cannot be brought for a vow or for a denova, or if one slaughters for a designation. One more?
A discussion.
That's it. Okay, that's it. Okay. Bye-bye.
Basra.
Gimel. If one surrounds his neighbors on three sides and his fence is off the first, second, and third sides, we do not obligate him. But Yoshi says if he stood up and fenced off the first side, we dissolve the obligation falling upon him. If the wall of the courtyard fell, we obligate him to rebuild it to the height of 4 cubits. Each is pressured to have contributed until the other brings proof that he did not contribute. From 4 cubits and upwards, we do not obligate him. If he built another wall near it, even though he did not yet place a roof upon it, we nevertheless dissolve the obligation for all of it upon him. It is presumed not to have contributed until he brings proof that he did contribute. We compel him to build a gatehouse and a door for the courtyard. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says not all courtyards require a gatehouse. We compel him to build a bill for the town of wall, double doors and a crossbar. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel says not all towns require a wall. How long must one be in the town to be treated like one of the citizens of the town? 12 months. However, if we bought a house there, it is immediately treated like he's one of the citizens of the town. Okay. And we are on to going. Zion. If one consecrated his possessions and among them there was an animal suitable for the altar, either male or female, Eliezer says the male should be held over to those needing burnt offerings, and the female should be sold to those needing peace offerings. The proceeds should be used with the rest of the property of an upkeep of the temple. Then Yeshua says the males themselves should be brought as burnt offerings, but the females should be sold to them needing peace offerings. Burnt offerings should be brought with their proceeds, and the rest of the property should be used for the upkeep of the temple. Rabbi Akiva says, I prefer Eliezer's view over Rabbi Yeshua's view because Rabbi Eliezer applies his logical method uniformly, whereas Rabbi Yeshua differentiates. It says Papias, I have been taught that both views are correct. They are correct. Regarding one consecrated explicitly, the halakha is according to Rabbi Eliezer, where whereas one regarding one kind has changed without explicit designation, the halakha is according to Rabbi Yeshua. If one consecrates his possessions and among them were things suitable for the altar, such as wines and oils and fowl, Rabbi Eliezer says they should be sold to those needing each particular item, and their proceeds should be used for burnt offerings. But the rest of the possessions should go to the upkeep of the temple. Once every 30 days, they would set the price paid by the treasury chamber, where whoever undertook to supply fine flour out 4 sold for a seller, the price subsequently stood at only 3 sellers for a seller, must supply at 4. But if he undertook to supply at 3 seller for a seller, and the price subsequently was at 4, he must supply 4. So the temple has the upper hand. Likewise, if the fine flour became wormy, the loss is his. If the wine went sour, the loss is his. He does not receive his money until the altar atones.
Okay.
Last, we have Zavim. You have time?
Yeah, let's do Zavim.
Bet. If the Zav struck a blow on a costume or a frame on a gutter board or a plank, even though it is merely tied down with ropes like of an oven, and the receptacle of the flour mill, on the base of a millstone, on the base of a hand-powered mill, on the measure of an olive grinder, and Rabbi Yossi says, additionally, a Zav who strikes on the beam of the bathhouse attendant, in all of these cases, the loaf that falls remains tahor. If the Zav struck a blow on a door, on a doorbolt, or on a lock, on an oar, or on a mill receptacle, on a weak tree, on a weak bench that grows from a strong tree, or an Egyptian ladder that is not abandoned, anchored with a nail, on a ramp, on a beam, on a door that is not covered with plaster, and all of these, the loaves that fall are tummy. If the Zav struck a blow on a carriage, a chest, and closet, the loaves that fall are tummy. However, Reb Chama and Reb Shimon blew them tahor. In the case of a Zav, who was lying upon 5 benches, or upon 5 benches, or upon 5 money belts, if he lines along their length, they are all tummy. However, if he lines across their width, they are all tahor. If he slept and there is a doubt whether he may have turned around on them, they are all tummy. If the Zav was lying upon 2 chairs with his 2 arms resting upon 2 of them, his 2 legs resting upon 2 of them, his head upon one, his body upon one, only this one is that beneath his body is tummy. If the Zav was standing on 2 chairs, Reb Shimon says if they are distant one from another, they are tahor.
Hey, that's it. And I'm going to run.
Have a great day. See you tomorrow. Thank you. Bye.